Hi, I'm Brittany Allyn, and welcome to Savor the Flavors. I've spent most of my adult life living in Nashville, Tennessee, but I'm originally from St. Stephen, Minnesota. And as the saying goes, you can take the girl out of Minnesota, but you can't take the Minnesota out of the girl. I'm still an avid Minnesota Vikings fan, and there's still certain dishes that I crave. Every time football season rolls around, for me, it's soup season, and this is always one of the first recipes I make. It's a Minnesota classic. Today I'll share with you my recipe for cream of chicken and wild rice soup. I've already got things started here. I've got 6 tablespoons of butter melting in my pot. We're going to add our mirepoix, which is a French word for the combination of onion, celery, and carrot, which is the base of so many great soups. Here I have a 1/4 cup of diced onion. I've also got a 1/4 cup of diced celery and a 1/2 cup of diced carrot. And you want a nice small dice on those carrots. And we're just going to give this a stir and get this sauteing over medium heat. Okay, now we're just going to let those veggies saute until they're nice and tender. While that's going on, we're going to talk about rice, the rice that is the state grain of Minnesota. It's also the only native grain to North America. And if you look at it, it's very dark in color, almost dark brown or black. And technically, it's not a rice, it's a semi-aquatic grain. Subtle difference there. Now, growing up in Minnesota, we had this all the time, used it in a lot of dishes. And on my website, savortheflavors.tv, I have several recipes that incorporate this. It wasn't until I moved to Tennessee that I realized not everybody knew about it. I had a hard time finding it. My mother would mail it to me or give it to me for Christmas. However, now it's becoming more popular. In fact, they're cultivating it. And this right here is actually cultivated. You can tell because all of the kernels are very uniform. And in wild rice, that's not the case. Now, there's a lot of health benefits. For those of you that are concerned with gluten in your diet, it is gluten-free. It's also high in antioxidants, and studies have shown that it helps to lower cholesterol, so it's very good for you. Now, if there is a downside, it's that it takes a while to cook. It's very slow cooking, so I got it started earlier. Okay, our veggies have gotten nice and tender, and now it's time for more ingredients. I'm going to add a 1/2 teaspoon of fresh thyme. I love the fresh thyme in this because there's something sort of earthy about that wild rice, and the thyme just really helps with that flavor. Now, we're going to just let that cook a little bit. I'm going to add to that a 1/2 cup of flour, and we'll get that all stirred in there. And we're just going to let this cook just a little bit to sort of get that raw flour taste cooked off. Okay, that's looking good. And now we're going to incorporate some chicken stock. I've got 3 cups of chicken stock here. Now we're just going to stir this together, and we'll bring it to a boil, and we'll keep stirring it continuously until it starts to thicken. Now, as you can see, this has started to thicken nicely. That's exactly what we're looking for. It's time to add more ingredients. Here I've got 1/3 cup of diced chicken, and that wild rice that we made earlier. My friends at Canoe Wild Rice have started making a canned, pre-cooked version of this rice, and it's a wonderful convenience. So of course you could use that too, and you just need 1.5 cups of the wild rice for this recipe. Also here I have 3 tablespoons of slivered almonds. Yes, nuts in my soup, but trust me, this is fabulous. I've got an 1/8 teaspoon of black pepper, and a half teaspoon of sea salt. Now, depending on your broth, if you're using a unsalted broth, you may have to salt more to taste. We're just going to get all of this combined and bring it to a boil. Okay, you can see that the soup has returned to a boil and it is nice and thick. Wild rice soup by nature is very thick. However, we've got one more ingredient here. I'm going to add to that 1 cup of half and half. Now, we're going to bring this to temperature and I have just a few finishing touches to share with you. I mentioned there were finishing touches, and one of the last things I like to do right before I serve this is to top it with a tablespoon of dry sherry. Just sort of work that across the top and then stir it in. It's just another wonderful layer of flavor. Now, we're going to ladle this in our bowl. Like I said, by nature, this is a very thick soup, and if you prefer it to be a little thinner, you could add more broth, but this is the way the recipe is intended. Okay, and then I like to top it with just a little bit of green. We're going to add a little bit of fresh parsley on the top. And there you have cream of chicken and wild rice soup. I don't know about you, but I can't wait one more second to try this. Here we go. Very hot. Smells so good. I love the nuttiness of that wild rice, and of course the almonds kind of give it a little bit of a crunch, which is really an interesting texture, and it's so creamy and delicious. If you weren't familiar with wild rice before, I hope you've discovered it today and tried in different recipes, especially this one, my cream of chicken and wild rice soup, and Savor the Flavors of Minnesota.